In this tutorial, we'll show you how to locate and to measure skin folds, and we'll be focusing on the Jackson Pollock sites. Make sure you have already watched the introduction tutorial before you view this one. After watching this video, you will learn why it's important to take skin folds, and then you'll know all the proper procedures for not just locating, but for measuring each of the sites. Now remember, in the introduction tutorial video, we talked about how skin fold thickness very highly correlated to overall percent body fat, and how overall percent body fat is very much highly related to risks of different types of metabolic and cardiovascular diseases. So therein lies our simple premise for conducting these tests. Remember, we also discussed that when measuring skin folds, be sure the client has adhered to all pre-test instructions, such as no exercising prior to the measurements. If the client's skin is moist with lotion or sweat, be sure you won't clean and dry the sites before measuring them. In this lab, you'll need some type of skin fold caliper. This is an example of a Lang caliper. It runs around $250 to $300. They're very precise, so before you do any kind of measurement, you want to make sure it's calibrated properly using the brick. And if it's not, there's an issue, you need to get it sent back to the manufacturer. There are many different kinds of plastic calipers. This is one of a more heavy grade caliper. You can see it's spring loaded, so when measuring, you just let go of the trigger for proper tension. The units of measure are also in millimeters. This is a less expensive plastic caliper. It runs under $10. You can see the notch there by the thumb, so it gives you an indicator of how hard to squeeze. These are also in units of millimeters as well as in inches. Alcohol swabs are good to clean the skin if needed. And be sure you've got your data sheet, pen that will mark on the skin, and then you should be all ready to roll. We'll start off with the chest, and when marking the chest, when locating the chest, it's not necessary to have the client remove the shirt. While some will have no issue with doing that, you can just ask them to take their right arm out of the sleeve, then fold that part of the shirt up on the shoulder. The chest is a diagonal fold, as halfway for men or a third of the way for women, along the natural line of the skin between the anterior axillary line and the nipple. Just think of the anterior axillary line as the front of the armpit. The mid-axillary line is a vertical fold along the mid-axillary line at the level of the xiphoid process. The mid-axillary line is simply from the armpit straight down through the hips, and the xiphoid process is found inferior to the pectoralis major. This bony structure is often easily palpated by having the client suck in at the abdomen or inhale deeply. The intersection of these two lines is where we will make our mark. When making a vertical fold, remember just to make a plus sign or cross sign. Next is the tricep. When marking the tricep, make sure you expose the shoulder. To do this, you can just simply roll up the sleeve. You want to be able to expose the acromion process, and when locating the tricep, you should always have the arm bent at 90 degrees at the elbow. You will be measuring down to the olecranon process, so you just take your flexible measuring tape. Make sure you're standing directly behind the client so that the tape does not go around the shoulder to the outside. Then bring the tape straight down to the olecranon process, after which you simply mark the halfway point. This is a vertical fold, so again, you'll make a cross. As mentioned in the introduction tutorial, if you don't have a measuring tape, you can use a piece of string or anything flexible, and all you do is situate it from one end to the other, bring one end up to the other, and now the bottom marks the halfway point. When locating the subscapular, the back needs to be exposed, so again, the arm can be pulled through the sleeve. Bring the arm behind the back, and that'll expose the inferior angle of the scapula, And this is a diagonal fold, about 2 centimeters just below that inferior angle. So you can make your X right there. Like the triceps, this will be the only time the arm will be bent. Using the Jackson-Pollock equation, the abdomen is a vertical fold 2 centimeters, remember that's right around an inch, to the right and level of the umbilicus. To mark the suprailiac, locate the anterior axillary line going straight down through the front of the iliac crest. Now, many people are often ticklish here when locating the site, so just be careful. You can easily palpate this bone, the iliac crest, but if not, have them lean over a bit. Just make sure there's something like a table they can balance on with their left hand. You'll make your mark just above the iliac crest, and since it's a diagonal fold, you'll make an X. When locating the thigh, have the client bend the leg by placing the right heel on the left toe. This creates a crease at the hip. Make sure there's some structure nearby where they can keep their balance like a chair or a table. Find the inguinal fold by palpating at the hip. You want to measure down to the top of the patella. Lift up the shorts to expose the thigh, and place one end of the measuring tape at the inguinal fold and bring the other one down to the superior patella. Mark halfway with a cross, since this will be a vertical fold. And now we want to start measuring. Remember, we want to take a minimum of 2 measurements, and the readings should be within 1 to 2 millimeters of each other. If the second reading is more than that, then take a third reading. Use the average of the 2 readings that meet this criteria. In other words, take multiple measurements until any of the 2 readings are 1 to 2 millimeters of each other. We also want to make sure that we rotate sites. Remember, we talked about not measuring sites consecutively, since we want at least 15 seconds between measurements to let the tissue fall back into place. The first site we will measure is the chest. Remember to pinch above the mark with your fingers. Place the calipers directly on the mark below your fingers. Release the tension for 1 to 2 seconds. Read the caliper, and then open the calipers before you release the pinch. You will note that this procedure is the same for all the sites. The caliper will be held in the right hand, and the left hand is used to pinch above the mark, at which time the caliper is placed on the mark. For those with greater skinfold thicknesses, you will have to take a larger pinch, but as stated in the introduction tutorial, try not to grab muscle tissue. Jiggling the pinch a little bit will help separate the tissue. Notice the pinch is held with the left hand throughout the entire procedure. You do not want to release the pinch when measuring. Also remember, you want to open the calipers before you remove them from the site. Dragging the calipers with tension off the site can be very uncomfortable. Notice the examiner is lowering himself to the level at which the sites are being measured. Trying to bend over and taking a measurement can be rather awkward, so if you're measuring a site that's lower on the body, it's best to kneel down and be level at that site. You probably noticed when we measured the tricep and the subscapular that the arms were hanging down at the side and relaxed, different than in the positions when we located them. It is important, however, to make sure that the thigh is relaxed when taking the skin fold by being in the same position when we located it. Now that we have measured all the sites, we rotate back up to the first site and we repeat the procedures in the same manner. Remember, the goal is to get 2 skin fold readings that are within 1 to 2 millimeters of each other. If after you've measured all the sites, you have some measurements that are more than 2 millimeters apart, you will want to measure them again until you get a consistent measurement that is within 1 to 2 millimeters. And this is our second measurement for the subscapular. Notice the arm is hanging down. And if you look there, probably a better technique is to keep the caliper aligned with the fold. In other words, it's a diagonal fold, so the caliper should be staying diagonal as well. Here is our second measurement for the abdomen. Remember, in some cases, you may have to jiggle the skin fold a little bit as you pull it away to separate the tissue. Our second measurement for the suprailiac. And then finally, our second measurement for the thigh. Now that we've finished measuring, you can see here the results from both trials. Since there are no measures more than 2 millimeters apart, I don't need to take any extra measures, and I can average them to obtain a sum of all skin folds. If we average 10 millimeters and 11 millimeters for the chest, we get 10.5 millimeters. We do the same for all the other sites. After we have all of our averages, we simply add them up for the sum. This is the number we need to enter into the equation to estimate body density. Here's the equation for the client. We start by placing his skin folds and age into the equation. Now I just simply follow the order of operations and show my work to get body density. Remember, it was 101 millimeters for the sum of 7 skin folds and 10,201 for the sum of 7 skin folds squared. Also notice I did not do any rounding. When calculating body density, do not round. The series equation is often used to estimate percent body fat, and now that we have our client's body density, we are ready to solve the equation. Remember to carry out all decimals for body density, and once you get to your final answer, you only need to carry it out 1 decimal place. In this case, we are estimating he has 13.5% body fat. Now you know what we need to do in order to conduct this test, the proper techniques and procedures for taking skin folds, and you know how to calculate percent body fat from body density.